That's not worth the paper it's printed on. My brother's voice carried across the dining room on the first anniversary of our father's death, and before I could cross the 3 meters between us, he had already flicked the envelope toward the kitchen trash. The same envelope my grandfather had pressed into my hands the winter before his stroke, whispering that I should open it only when I truly needed something to stand on. I didn't move calmly. I lurched across the room in my socks and knocked the recycling bin sideways, reaching for it. The envelope skidded under the cabinet. My brother laughed. My mother set down her coffee cup and said nothing. I got on my hands and knees on the linoleum floor of our family home and I picked it back up. Before I tell you what was inside those pages, I want to ask you something. Tell me in the comments, what is the most dismissive thing a family member has ever done to something that mattered to you? I read every single one. My name is Daphne, I'm 31, and I'm a social worker in Calgary. I've spent my career learning to sit with people in the worst moments of their lives, to hold space for grief without letting it swallow me. I thought that was a professional skill. It took my grandfather's death to understand it was survival. 3 days after that anniversary dinner, I stood inside the Sun Life Financial office on 8th Avenue SW, downtown Calgary, holding the envelope inside a freezer bag. The paper was old, cream-colored, the kind printed before everything moved to digital. One corner was crumpled from where it had slid under the bin. I'd smoothed it flat with my palm the night before, pressing it against the kitchen counter, as carefully as I would a patient's intake form. I'm here to inquire about a life insurance policy, I told the woman at the front desk. It may have been dormant for some time. She was maybe 22, with a headset around her neck and a calendar of provincial parks on the wall behind her. She took the envelope with 2 fingers, unfolded the document inside, typed in a number, and squinted at her screen. Then, without saying a single word, she stood up from her desk, walked to the back hallway, and disappeared through a door. She was gone for 4 minutes. I counted. I counted because the silence in that lobby had the quality of a forest right before a storm. You can feel the air change before you can name what's coming. You just don't know how large the tree is that's about to fall. When she returned, she was not alone. The branch manager, a composed man in a gray blazer, walked beside her. Behind him was a woman I would later learn was the regional compliance director for Western Canada. They didn't look at my thrift store peacoat or my worn winter boots. They looked at me the way people look at someone standing in a room they weren't sure she knew she had access to. Not with suspicion, but with a kind of careful, almost breathless, respect. Miss Hughes, the compliance director, said quietly, "We have a private meeting room. Would you please come with us?" It wasn't a question. I followed them past frosted glass panels and into a small room with a round table, a carafe of water, and a box of tissues placed in the center, with the specific deliberateness of an office that has delivered difficult news before. The branch manager slid a printed summary across the table and folded his hands. "Your grandfather opened a whole life policy with us in 1987, he began. He designated you as the sole beneficiary in 1994. You were 4 years old. He never amended the designation in 37 years. I looked at the page. My grandfather had been a machinist at a manufacturing plant in Red Deer his entire working life. He earned what machinists earned, enough, carefully managed, never more. In 1987, he'd taken out a modest whole life policy. But in 1991, he made a single one-time additional contribution into a participating policy with dividend options. He reinvested every dividend, without exception, for over 3 decades. He never withdrew. He never redirected. He just kept paying the monthly premium from his paycheck, every month for years, and then he died quietly and no one looked." The director pointed to the figure at the bottom of the page. "The current death benefit, including 37 years of accumulated and reinvested dividends, is $1,840,000 Canadian. The number sat on that page the way a very large stone sits at the bottom of a very clear river, absolutely still, immovable. $1,840,000. I looked at the box of tissues. I looked at the number. I thought about my brother laughing as he flicked that envelope toward the garbage. He had held nearly $2 million in his hand and thrown it away because he never thought to look inside the cover. "Is the beneficiary designation still current?" I asked. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "Yes," the director said. "It has never been amended. This amount flows directly and solely to you outside of probate." I touched the crumpled corner of the old document. It wasn't trash. It had never been trash. It was a promise my grandfather had made in 1994 to a 4-year-old girl he loved more than she knew, and he had kept it without once mentioning it. I drove home in the dark. The Calgary skyline in January sits against a black sky like a row of lit matches. I parked in the lot of our apartment building and sat in the car for 11 minutes before I could make myself go inside. My husband Joel was at the kitchen table when I came through the door, surrounded by monitors and open browser tabs. He's a network security analyst, the kind of person who finds patterns in places other people see noise. He looked up when he saw my face and he didn't ask if I was okay. He asked, "What did you find?" I told him the number. He set his mug down with both hands, slowly and deliberately, the way you set something down when you need a moment to confirm you heard it correctly. Then he turned his second monitor toward me. I had asked him, before I went to Sun Life, to do one quiet thing, just look at my brother's public financial footprint. Gavin had spent 15 years building himself into the family's financial authority. He talked about interest rates at Christmas dinner and corrected everyone else's investment decisions as though it were a public service. After our father got sick 5 years ago, he had edged into the role of informal estate manager. After our father died, he positioned himself as executor, claiming Dad had expressed verbal wishes he could interpret. There was a will, but it was old, written before my brother and I were born, and a newer one had been discussed during my father's illness but never signed. My brother had handled the distribution of my father's registered accounts, his RRSP, his TFSA, citing his role as executor and those claimed verbal wishes. My mother received the majority. My brother received a significant portion. I received a number that felt at the time like a rounding error. "Look at the civil filings," Joel said. I looked. 3 judgments registered against my brother in the Alberta courts over the past 26 months. 2 from creditors, 1 from an unpaid commission dispute with a former business partner. He had refinanced an investment property in Airdrie using a private mortgage lender at an interest rate that would have made any chartered bank flinch. He had missed payments. A notice of power of sale had been filed the previous October. Tucked at the bottom of Joel's research notes was a CRA notice of reassessment. My brother was under audit for 4 consecutive years of business income. He wasn't a financial authority, he was drowning, and the only thing large enough to save him was whatever he could pull from the family estate. Or whatever he thought I didn't know I had. I had barely fully absorbed that when my phone rang. I put it on speaker without saying anything. Joel stopped typing. "Hey Daff." My brother's voice was warm, comfortable, the voice of a man who assumed the ambient temperature of every room bent to his convenience. "I've been thinking about Dad's old paperwork. Any of it worth following up on?" "A beat." "What makes you ask?" I said. He paused a half-second too long. "Mom found some boxes in the office. Just want to make sure we've tied everything up for the estate properly." "I can take care of it, obviously. That's what I'm here for." He was already positioning, already recasting himself as the caretaker, the organizer, the person who handles complicated things. "I've got it looked after," I said. The warmth in his voice sharpened very slightly, like a blade being cleaned. "Daphne, you're not in a position to manage these things alone. You've got a good heart, but estate administration has real legal implications. Let me take point on this. I'll run everything through the estate account and distribute accordingly." Distribute accordingly. The phrase sat in the kitchen air like smoke. "Okay," I said, "I'll wait to hear from you." I hung up. Joel was already building the document. Somewhere in the months before his death, my grandfather had driven from Red Deer to Calgary to have a quiet lunch with me at a Vietnamese place on 17th Avenue. He ate his pho carefully, the way he did everything, and then he put a sealed envelope on the table beside my water glass. "Keep this somewhere safe," he said. "Don't mention it at home. Open it when you need something to stand on." I had kept it for 3 years, in my coat pocket at first, then in a cedar box on the shelf above my desk. I never opened it because I never felt like I'd reached the moment he meant, the moment when the floor was genuinely gone. I understand now that he had been watching for my entire childhood. He was not a demonstrative man. He didn't make speeches or write letters or call his grandchildren on their birthdays with prepared sentiments. But he watched. And what he saw in our family, the way my brother occupied the center of every room, while I quietly organized the edges of it, the way my mother thanked him for setting the table when I had set it, the way my father used my brother's name and his sister when he introduced us to people, my grandfather saw it all and he said nothing, because he was not a man who made scenes. He just found another way. He sat near me at family gatherings quietly, like a counterweight. And then he drove to Calgary and put $2 million on a table beside my water glass. The Donner Appreciation Dinner at my mother's church was held on a Saturday in early February, 120 people in the fellowship hall, with a catered meal and a small podium program to recognize the congregation's major supporters. My father had donated modestly every year of his adult life. My brother had been listed as a family donor for the past 3 years, partly because he had claimed the charitable tax credit on his business return. He would be there. I wore navy. Not to be invisible. I was completely finished with Invisible, but because Navy says I am here and I am serious, without announcing that I'm about to dismantle the narrative. My brother found me near the coffee station at 7:15. He looked polished, the careful surface he always maintained, tanned despite January, groomed, jacket that fit precisely well enough to signal money without announcing it. He looked at me and then did a quick scan of the room, checking for Joel, for folders, for what my posture was communicating. I smiled first. Gavin. I extended the leather portfolio. I kept my voice quiet, slightly apologetic, the pitch of someone asking for a favor. I think you were right. I don't really understand how all this works and I don't want to handle it wrong. Can you help me with the transfer? His shoulders dropped. Not dramatically, just the 5-degree release of a man who had been braced for a fight and discovered there wasn't one. That's what I had been waiting for, the loosening. He took the portfolio, he opened it. He didn't read it carefully. That is the specific nature of people who have never believed fine print could contain a surprise meant for them. He saw the cover page. My name, his name, the words policy transfer and estate administration authorization. He saw the signature block at the bottom of the third page. He did not read the second page, which was a statutory declaration acknowledging that the signatory had managed estate accounts without legal authority and accepted sole personal liability for any regulatory findings associated with those accounts. He did not read the third page, which itemized the RRSP and TFSA distributions he had made over the previous 14 months, with dates, amounts, and cross-references to the estate reconstruction our lawyer had prepared. He pulled out his pen, a Parker Sonnet, the kind you use when you want people to notice the pen, and he signed. With the easy rolling flourish of a man who is winning. He closed the portfolio and handed it back to me, and was already looking past my shoulder towards a table of city councilors he wanted to speak to. This is the right call, Daff, he said. Leave the complicated stuff to people who understand it. I thanked him quietly. I walked to the far side of the fellowship hall. I photographed every signed page. I sent the file to our estate lawyer and to the associate at the CRA Voluntary Disclosure Office who had been briefed the week before. Then I found my mother, kissed her cheek, and asked her if she'd tried the butter tarts. My brother was at the podium 20 minutes later. He'd been asked to say a few words on behalf of the family, in tribute to our father's legacy. He stood in the light with his shoulders back and he spoke genuinely, fluently, warmly, about my father's integrity, his generosity, the way he had always believed in treating people fairly, and doing right by the people who depended on him. He was a man who only ever took what was his, my brother said. At the back of the room, Joel put his hand on my arm. My phone vibrated once, our lawyer received and confirmed. My brother stepped down from the podium to warm applause. He crossed the room and caught my eye from 20 feet away. He gave me the nod, the collegial, satisfied nod of someone who believes they have secured an alliance. I nodded back. He had 14 days before the CRA examiner made formal contact. The statutory declaration he had signed was not fabricated. It was an accurate account of what he had genuinely done, and he had signed it willingly in front of witnesses in a church fellowship hall with his own pen. He thought he was processing an inheritance claim. He had signed a confession. Estate proceedings do not move like television procedurals. They move like water through limestone. Slowly, without an ounce, and with a complete indifference to hurry. By April, my brother's audit had been expanded to include the estate account and the unauthorized distributions. The power of sale on his Airdrie property proceeded. The Real Estate Council of Alberta opened a conduct review. He called me once, not to threaten, not to negotiate. He asked if I would testify as a character witness on his behalf. I told him I needed to think about it. I didn't say yes, I didn't say no. I let the silence hold and then I let the call end. He didn't call again after that. It's late July and I'm sitting on the dock at my grandfather's cottage near Rocky Mountain House. The lake is the color of old glass in the morning. I fixed this dock last September with Joel, a borrowed drill and 2 YouTube tutorials on joist repair. The porch railing needed painting too. I painted it green, the same green it had always been, the color I remember from every summer I ever visited here, the color of my grandfather's quiet, patient love. The policy settlement cleared in March. $1,840,000, deposited on a Tuesday morning in a confirmation email that looked identical to every other email in my inbox. I'm still a social worker. I still take my case files home on Fridays. I still make too much coffee and forget to finish the second cup. Joel still leaves his socks 2 feet from the bathroom hamper and acts genuinely baffled every time I mention it. The money doesn't make noise. I've set aside a portion to establish a small bursary in my grandfather's name for trade apprentices in the Red Deer area. People learning the kind of skilled, precise, under-acknowledged work he did quietly for 40 years, without anyone calling it a legacy while he was alive. The rest is invested and growing at its own pace, for the same reason he kept paying that monthly premium on a machinist's salary for 3 decades. Not for urgency, for someone he loved. I keep the original policy document in the cedar box on the cottage bookshelf. I don't need to look at it. I know what it says. I know what it meant. My grandfather never told me he was proud of me. He wasn't that kind of man. But he drove to Calgary, sat across from me at a small table, and put the evidence of 37 years of quiet, deliberate love beside my water glass, and he said, "Open it when you need something to stand on." I thought he was talking about money. He was talking about the floor. I have it now, and no one is taking it from me again.